Turning now to politics in our divided country. Former President Donald Trump is facing a fourth possible indictment this week, this time out of the state of Georgia. He's already facing, get this, 78 criminal charges combined. And despite all of it, Trump is dominating the Republican field as his supporters see these indictments as partisan attacks. Joining us now to talk about all of this is Isaac Hale, assistant professor of politics at Occidental College. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, Kate.
Well, it's been 8 years since Trump seized the political spotlight, and these indictments continue to divide the country, with each side seeing the other as a threat to democracy. Can you compare this to any other time in our nation's history?
Sure. If we're looking for an era of similarly high polarization, we can look back to the pre-Civil War period in the United States. But of course, that's not a period that is a very nice or favorable comparison for the U.S. Politics were obviously hopelessly divided at that point over a very fundamental issue, being slavery. And it's not a good place when our politics are as polarized as they were prior to the breakdown of the Republic.
Well, and looking at the calendar, right, Trump is likely to go to trial in maybe one, maybe more of these cases while he's running for election. And with 78 charges, the odds of one sticking seem pretty good. So I hate to ask people to make predictions, but do you foresee a presidential election where one of the candidates is possibly facing time behind bars?
Well, I'm not in the market of making predictions, but I will say we are heading into an unprecedented scenario, as you say. And there are all sorts of questions to have here. Of course, if Trump is not convicted on any of these charges, we're not in an unprecedented situation. But if he is, then, when does it happen? Does it happen before the RNC, at which point what happens to the nomination there? Is it after the RNC and they have to stick with him on the ballot? Does it happen after votes have been cast in the general election? All of these are unprecedented scenarios, which would be, I think, very difficult for voters and the Republican Party to wrap their head around. Now, it's not unthinkable for someone to run for office once convicted. Socialist candidate Eugene V. Debs ran for president from prison, earned nearly 1 million votes in the 1920 presidential election. He was sentenced for 10 years under the Sedition Act for speaking out against World War I. His slogan was "For President, Convict Number 9653." But of course, Eugene Debs was not in a pole position to become president of the United States, and polls currently show former President Trump and President Biden neck and neck.
I really hope that the candidates have to address this in 2 weeks when Republicans have their first debate. But meanwhile, the House GOP continues their calls for impeaching President Biden over his son's business dealings. Speaker McCarthy seems somewhat reluctant, maybe because we've seen impeachments and indictments actually boost Trump's poll numbers. Do you think the same would be true for Biden?
Well, notably, we've seen Trump's poll numbers most improved among Republican voters. His overall poll numbers haven't actually improved that much as a result of the impeachment proceedings brought by Democrats. But I think Kevin McCarthy has reason to be concerned. If you look back at the impeachment proceedings against Bill Clinton in the 90s, those actually did improve President Clinton's poll numbers. And I think he's worried about a repeat if voters perceive it to be a similarly political impeachment. Another major concern for Kevin McCarthy is that he's not in a particularly strong position as Speaker. Viewers may remember the very drawn out and charged speakers fight that happened at the beginning of this year. Republicans have a very narrow majority in the House, and perceptions that an impeachment proceeding was not going well against President Biden could seriously imperil the leadership of Speaker McCarthy going forward.
I want to get your take on that high-stakes vote in Ohio today. It's a proposed constitutional change. Basically, this is about determining abortion rights in the state. Many seeing this as a proxy battle over abortion fights nationwide. And this was a key issue in the last midterm. How will abortion shape 2024 elections?
Yeah, well, it's hard to say what's going to happen in Ohio exactly. This is an amendment, it's correctly viewed as a proxy battle about abortion, but what's actually being asked is for Ohio voters to make it harder for themselves to make policy change to the ballot box. So it's an odd amendment, and no one's really sure. There's not much polling. No one's really sure what's going to happen, although endorsements on this measure have really split along party lines. Is abortion going to continue to be a major issue in 2024? It seems likely. It was a very large issue in 2022. I would expect that President Biden and Democrats will be talking a lot about this issue, especially because the decision in Dobbs to overturn Roe v. Wade remains quite unpopular.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about Trump taking to social media to blame wokeness for the U.S. women's soccer loss in the World Cup, with many on the right even celebrating the loss. Is America so divided that we can't even root for our national team without politics getting involved?
Well, I don't know if this goes for everyone. I don't think we should necessarily put all Americans in the same camp as America's politicians. But what we have seen in the U.S. is the rise of what political scientists call effective polarization. This is the tendency of people identifying as Republicans or Democrats to view opposing partisans negatively and co-partisans positively. And we see this spill over into countless aspects of American life. And I think without mediating institutions that we've traditionally had in the US, such as ideologically distinct state parties or independent and local media, or alternative institutions that we see in other countries, such as strong third parties, it's not clear how this situation improves.
Isaac Hale, Assistant Professor of Politics at Occidental College, thank you so much for being with us today. Excellent historical context. I appreciated that.
Thank you.